15 West 30th Street, 3rd floor. Sorry? 151 West 30th Street. So we'll begin by saying the prayer for the spreading of the teachings throughout the length and breadth of the West. If you scroll down, you can find all the prayers. By the force of the blessings of the non-fallacious three precious chairs, and of the truth of our pure selfless wishes, may the precious Buddha's teachings flourish and spread to the expanse of all areas throughout the length and breadth of the West, for all the people living there together with their near ones, who have engaged in the teachings and have faith and respect for them. May all conditions adverse to their practice of the pure Dharma be dispelled, and an excellent collection of favorable conditions increase likewise, and especially for those who work on methods to accomplish this promotion and spreading of the victorious one's teachings, which are the source of benefit and happiness. May they never be oppressed by masses of interference and adverse conditions, and may this spontaneously happen just as we have hoped and wished. Thus have I heard once. The Blessed One was dwelling in the royal domains of Ultra Peak Mountain, together with a big gathering of great monks and great bodhisattvas. At that time, the Blessed One entered the samadhi which examines the dharmas called profound illumination. And at the same time, noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva Mahasattva, looking at the profound practice of transcendent knowledge, saw the five skandhas and their natural emptiness. Then, through the inspiration of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said to Avalokiteshvara, how should those noble ones learn to wish to follow a profound practice of transcendent knowledge? And Avalokiteshvara answered, Venerable Shariputra, whoever wishes to follow a profound practice of transcendent knowledge should look at it like this. Seeing the five skandhas and their natural emptiness. Form is empty, emptiness itself is form, emptiness is not separate from form, form is not separate from emptiness. In the same way, feeling, discriminating awareness, compositional factors, and consciousness are empty. Thus all dharmas are empty and have no characteristics. They are unworn and unceasing. They are not impure or pure. They neither decrease nor increase. Therefore, since there is emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no discriminating awareness, no compositional factors, no consciousness, no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind, no appearance, no sound, no smell, no taste, no sensation, no object of mind, no quality of sight, no quality of hearing, no quality of smelling, no quality of tasting, no quality of sensing, no quality of thought, no quality of mind consciousness. There are no gods from ignorance to old age and death, nor ever now. There is no suffering, no cause of suffering, no ending of suffering, and no path, no wisdom, no attainment, no non-attainment. Therefore, since there is no attainment, the Bodhisattvas abide by means of transcendent knowledge, and since there is no obscurity of mind, they have no fear, they transcend falsity and pass beyond bounds of sorrow. All Buddhas who dwell in the past, present, and future, by means of transcendent knowledge, fully and clearly awaken to unsurpassed true complete enlightenment. Therefore, the mantra of transcendent knowledge, the mantra of deep insight, the unsurpassed mantra, the unequaled mantra, the mantra which calms all suffering should be known as true, for there is no deception. In transcendent knowledge, the mantra is proclaimed. Tayaka Om Gata 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 Samsaya Bodhi Soha. O Shariputra, this is how Bodhisattva Mahasattva should learn and find transcendent knowledge. Then the Blessed One rose from that samadhi and praised the Bodhisattva Mahasattva Avalokiteshvara, saying, Good, son, noble family, profound transcendent knowledge should be practiced just as you have taught, and the Tathagatas will rejoice. When the Blessed One has said this, the whole gathering in the world with its gods, humans, Ishvaras, and Gandharvas, their hearts full of joy, praise the words of the Blessed One.
Generate bodhicitta. With the wish to free all beings, I shall always go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I reach freedom. Inspired by wisdom and compassion, today in Buddha's presence, I generate mind and awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. As long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, until they have to remain to dispel the miseries of the world. With the wish to free all beings, I shall always go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I reach full enlightenment. Inspired by wisdom and compassion, today in Buddha's presence, I generate mind and full awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. As long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, until then I to remain to dispel the miseries of the world. With the wish to free all beings, I shall always go for refuge to the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha until I reach full enlightenment. Inspired by wisdom and compassion, today in Buddha's presence, I generate mind and full awakening for the benefit of all sentient beings. As long as space endures, as long as sentient beings remain, until then may I to remain to dispel the miseries of the world. You want to close the... So, last week here we arrived at page 38 towards the bottom of Ethics for the New Millennium. So to go back a little bit, His Holiness has been discussing the different ways in which things exist dependently, interdependently, or originate dependently. And he talks about first the way in which phenomena, things exist due to causes, so that something doesn't exist in the permanent way that we think things exist. They exist as the result of causes. And that causal quality it's not just that something is made due to someone's having carved, let's say, the statue of the Buddha. There are all sorts of aspects to the causal nature of this. There is the seed that fell in the forest and then grew. Then there is the attitude of the person who decided to carve it, his or her decision to carve it, and how they carved it, and the motivation of the person who's doing the carver, the situation within which the carving was done, the workshop, and all the causes that bring about the existence of the workshop where this was caused. So there are all sorts of causes that bring about the result of the Buddha that's before us here, and that when we start to view things not as simply the Buddha that is here before us, the statue of the Buddha that is here before us, but viewing the causal nature of this, the way in which all these different ingredients, let's say, come together, seeing the intricate nature of the existence of this breaks down the natural way in which we view it, the natural way in which we view all the things that we interact with. So that's one particular way of understanding the interdependent origination of things. The other is that things are made up of parts, and so something exists not simply due to being caused, but that the thing actually, you wouldn't have, let's say, the microphone here before me. There's this little grill pattern. I don't know what all the things are that are inside, and the cord and the holder. All of those parts together constitute the microphone. So the whole idea of something not being a solid, permanent entity, but being coming together due to being the totality of parts. Now, each of these can be viewed in more and more subtle ways. Each of these aspects of interdependent origination can be seen to be more there are sort of rougher ways of viewing this, and as we think about them, there can be more and more subtle ways. In terms of the impermanent nature of, let's say, the statue of the Buddha, we can think that it is impermanent in that it is caused. It has this nature of impermanence. When it comes together, when the ingredients, whether it's the parts or whether it's the causes come together, we have an entity which exists within time. So the Buddha of right now and the Buddha of right now are two different Buddhas, each of which, one is the result of the first moment or instance of, when I said that, being the cause. So that causal nature of the existence of the Buddha, when we start to really look into it, we see that the Buddha exists in this momentary way, each moment of its existence being the result of the prior moment and the cause of the next moment. I think I've mentioned this in the past, but in certain Theravadan schools, there is a meditator works towards identifying these units of time that are indivisible, and so that they work at seeing that the Buddha, this Buddha statue exists. It's a series of it exists as a series of moments of existence, and there's one school that believes that in a snap of a finger there are 60, whatever you would call them, elements, increments of fraction of a snap, and that 60th of a snap is an indivisible amount of time. And a meditator can actually experience and see that indivisible amount of time. There's another school that says, no. It's like a 260th of a snap of a finger. And if you go deeper in your meditation, you can actually recognize that element of time. Now, the argument to that that other schools bring is that even if you talk about a 260th of a snap of a finger as an element of time, that when you go from the, let's say, the 258th moment to the 259th moment to the 260th moment, you have each moment touches the next moment, and each moment also touches the prior moment in that stream of moments, and so that you have a division between the beginning of that moment and the end of that moment, so that even though you might not be able to actually experience that sub-increment, theoretically you can acknowledge that it must exist, so that you then go to, there's no end to the amounts or the divisions of a moment of time. That all of this is breaking down the way in which we perceive things as existing. We break down the way in which things exist within time, to the point where we say that there's no moment of time that we can point at and say, this exists in this moment, because as soon as we've said that, that moment is gone. And there's no actual elemental moment of time that we can point at and let's say, freeze. In the same way, the parts that make up the, we have the two examples here, the parts that make up the microphone, there are schools that claim that there is an infinitesimal, there's what they call an indivisible element of unit of form, and that cannot be subdivided, so that the microphone is made up of a bunch of these indivisible particles. So if we imagine this in our minds, we have this microphone made up of these indivisible particles, but they all touch each other in order to make the greater whole. And therefore they have sides, and they are, again, theoretically divisible. And those sides have sides, and those sides have sides, and it goes on forever. There's no point where you can say, no, that's it. So all of these things are dissolving, are breaking down our notion of how things might exist. And that's the whole point of what His Holiness is presenting here. So going back a page to 337, this concept of dependent origination in Tibetan is called tendrel. And in Sanskrit, patita samudpada. So tendrel, these are each of these, whether it's the particles, the particles over here, the impermanent, the temporal quality, the causal, are all breaking down, making us understand the way in which the phenomenon exists in some kind of a dependent way. The third level, all phenomena can be understood to be dependently originated because when we analyze them, we find that ultimately they lack independent identity. This can be understood from the way in which we refer to certain phenomena. For example, the word action and agent. So an action depends on an agent on an action. So do parent and child. So we went over this last week, so I'm just reviewing the different ways in which this tendrel, interdependent origination, exists. When we ask whether the identity of something is determined by its shape, its function, its specific parts, that is, it's being compounded of clay. So here we're talking about a pot. A pot is a pot. When we see something and we identify it as a pot, it's because it performs a certain function. We can attribute, we can give the name to it because of its shape and because of its ability to perform a certain function. So what exactly is a clay pot? When we look for something we can describe as its final identity, we find that the pot's very existence, and by implication that of all other phenomena, is to some extent provisional, dependent, and determined by convention. When we ask whether its identity is determined by its shape, its function, its specific parts, that is, being compounded of clay, water, and so on, we find that the term pot is merely a verbal designation. There is no single characteristic that can be said to identify it, nor indeed does the totality of its characteristics. We can imagine pots of different shapes that are no less pot. And because we can only really speak of its existing in relation to a complex nexus of causes and conditions, viewed from this perspective, it has no defining quality. In other words, it does not exist in and of itself, but rather it is dependently originated. Now, this breaking down of a pot, not in terms of being caused, not in terms of parts, but in terms of only existing in that we name it such and such, is the most subtle way of viewing dependent origination. As far as mental phenomena are concerned, so these are here, the examples that we've been discussing are things, are physical objects. We talk about, so things are produced, things are impermanent. So if you have an impermanent phenomenon, it exists, as I said, within time, each moment of its existence being the cause of the next moment. Things perform a function. Now, when we talk about thoughts are not impermanent. They don't exist momentarily. Thoughts don't have that physical nature of disintegrating thoughts may come about due to our having thought about something, but the thought doesn't have a momentary nature according to the way in which it is explained in Buddhist philosophy. So, let's take, for example, the perception of a flower. We're not talking about the flower, we're talking about the perception of a flower. So, when I see a flower, I'm perceiving the flower. We're talking about that perception. So what are the parts that make that? In order for such a perception to arise, there must be a sense organ. In other words, if I'm seeing the flower, when I perceive it with my eye consciousness, there has to be the eye consciousness. Second, there must be a condition. In this case, the flower. So the flower is the condition, and we talk about the flower that I perceive and the eye consciousness viewing that flower as having a causal relationship. In other words, the flower that I see brings about, causes a perception of flower. They are not simultaneous. The second moment of perception of flower is simultaneous with the first moment of perception of flower. So they work like this. Does that make sense? Yeah? Okay.
The sequence is there.
Sequence is
Flower
there.
and the perception.
Third, in order for perception to occur, there must be something which directs the focus of the perceiver to the object. So there has to be, let's say, the intention to look, the attraction to, the whatever. Then, through the causal interaction of these conditions, a cognitive event occurs. I see flower, which we call the perception of a flower. Now let's examine what exactly constitutes this event. Is it only the operation of the sense faculties? Is it only the interaction between that faculty and the flower itself? Or is it something else? We find that in the end, we cannot understand the concept of perception except in the context of an indefinitely complex series of causes and conditions. In other words, you have a whole bunch of causes that lead you to perceive the flower, that cause you to experience the flower in the way you do. It's a very complicated set of and then you have you can bring into the picture how you perceive the flower. You look at the flower and you say it's beautiful. You look at the flower and you have preconceived notions of what a beautiful flower is, and either the flower you're perceiving live up to those standards or the flower doesn't. So you have the way you experience that perception of flower that your own background, your own past bring to that experience of flower. If we take consciousness itself, so we're not talking about the perception of the flower, we're talking about consciousness as the object of our investigation, although we tend to think of it in terms of something intrinsic and unchangeable. In other words, consciousness, that element of clear knowing, let's call it that, we think of as being a quality that we possess. We don't doubt its we think of it as existing from its own side and just being there. Although we tend to think of it in terms of something intrinsic and unchangeable, we find that it too is better understood in terms of dependent origination. This is because apart from individual perceptual cognition and emotional experiences, it is difficult to posit an independently existent entity. Rather, consciousness is more like a construct which arises out of a spectrum of complex events. So when we're identifying consciousness, we see that it exists in respect to what it is conscious of, the moods that we bring to our consciousness, the moment of consciousness. There are all these different aspects to how consciousness is experienced. Another way to understand the concept of dependent origination is to consider the phenomenon of time. Ordinarily, we suppose that there is an independently existent entity which we call time. We speak of time past, present, and future. However, when we look more closely, we see that, again, this concept is merely a convention. We find that the term present moment is just a label denoting the interface between the tense past and tenses past and future. And if you think of it, we think about time. If we take for granted this idea that time moves along and we exist within it, we only experience the present. We can think back to the past and we can imagine the future, but we are only experiencing the present. And when I say the present, I said it, now that's the third time I've used the word. Each time was a different present. As soon as we talk about the present now, it's gone. So present is once I have said present, it's already in the past. So to identify time and to look at it, to break it down in terms of past and future, and that sliver, that thing between past and future, which is the now that we experience, breaks down our concept of time. Suddenly time is no longer, I look at my watch and I think, I can watch time go by. But when we really look, it's hard to identify time. We cannot actually pinpoint the present. Just a fraction of a second before the supposed present moment lies the past. Just a fraction of a second after it lies the future. Yet if we say that the present moment is now, no sooner have we spoken the word than it lies in the past. If we were to maintain that nevertheless there must be a simple moment which is indivisible into either past or future, we would in fact have no grounds for any separation into past, present, and future at all. So if one were to actually hold to the idea that there was an individual, indivisible element of time, then something that we could hold on to, then would be stuck in the present. There could be no past or future. If there is a single moment which is indivisible, then we would have only the present. But without a concept of the present, it becomes difficult to speak about the past and the future, since both clearly depend on the present. So past exists in respect to the present. Future exists in respect to the present. Moreover, and this now here, when I say that, we have to think back to this idea of interdependent or dependent origination. Pratita samudpada. or Tendrel in Tibetan, and see that this concept of time that we see as having it just flows. Suddenly, when we break it down and we really analyze it, it takes on a whole other quality of existence. That objective existence of time is no longer really a valid way of perceiving of it. It is dependently arising, dependently originating. There's a dependent quality to it. And now this dependent quality that we're sort of exploring through these examples, one of the reasons why we become attached to things, why we become attached to people, why all of our attachment, which then evolves into there's the attachment, and then there's anger, hatred, and all afflictive emotions arise from our perception of ourselves and others as existing not in this interdependent way, but in some kind of a solid, independent way. And what we're trying to change is our perception of ourselves and of others and of all phenomena, from seeing them as, and seeing ourselves as independent, i.e. Intrinsically existent, inherently existent, non-dependently existent. We're trying to transfer that into perceiving ourselves to exist dependently, interdependently, where we are trying to view others as existing interdependently, not independently. We're trying to view phenomena, things, as existing interdependently, not independently. So, if we were to conclude from our analysis that the present does not exist, we would have to deny not only worldly convention, but also our own experience. Indeed, when we begin to analyze our experience of time, we find that here the past disappears and the future is yet to come. We experience only the present. Where do these observations leave us? Certainly, things become somewhat more complex when we think along these lines. The more satisfactory conclusion is surely to say that the present does indeed exist, but we cannot conceive of it doing so inherently or objectively. The present comes into being in dependence on the past and future. Okay, I've spoken a lot. I should be quiet and hear from you how to apply this, how you would apply this to your lives.
This is the reason I'm always late.
That's right.
I said to Tony, this is the reason I'm always late, because time doesn't exist.
It says time
Doesn't exist
That's
conventionally.
Right. That's
because time doesn't
I'm
exist.
sorry, doesn't
Inherently.
doesn't exist inherently.
But it does exist conventionally.
Conventionally, yes.
Except the Jersey Transit trains, in that case.
I have trouble to say that we can only experience the present and that the present is gone in an instant. But I would say that perhaps we don't really, unless, our perceptions and consciousness, unless they're instant, then probably while we're experiencing the thing, we might not really recognize what's happening. And shortly afterwards, I would argue that we have a perception of it. And that it's not, so therefore, no, we're not I think it's true that, you know, just the present is only the second and it's immediately gone. But whether that, you know, that's like saying, I don't know whether you could be so precise with the time when it comes to like consciousness, and that consciousness, I would argue, is typically somewhat delayed.
But consciousness may be delayed in respect to what it is experiencing. There may be a thought process that takes place, but consciousness also exists within. You have when we're talking about are we talking about sense consciousnesses? So when I am looking at something, or are you talking about when I see something, my sense consciousness of seeing the watch before me, that's a moment of time. Then if I think about it, and I think, you know, I have an opinion of it, of the watch, that's something that comes after the moment of perceiving it. Which are you talking about?
Well, no, I'm not talking about what do I think of this thing. It's just to recognize, oh, that's a flower, or you know, let's say you're driving a car and you see the red light, but you might not recognize it immediately. It's like a, you know,
That's something to work on.
Yeah, because I'm walking.
I mean, people's reaction times differ. I mean, it can be, you know, very small, but it could be, you know, as much as, I don't know.
So when you look up at the light and you see green or you see red, you're saying that it takes a little time for that image
Well,
to...
sure, I mean, it might be a tenth of a second or a tenth of a second.
And it changes.
From green to red.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, but we have to admit that that moment of change from green to red or from red to green, that there's a moment, or there's orange in between. Is that...
Ooh.
Depends on the
That's cheap.
The relay, that whatever, this the switch that changes the.
But are you really saying that it takes a moment for you to proceed to register that there's an orange
Well, no,
before
I
you?
don't want to. It's just that the notion doesn't seem that precise. And I don't know, to say that, you know, that you only are in we're only in the present, there's only, you know, that it's, perhaps it's only a reference point between the future and the past. You know, and she suggested that. And that's where it's most useful, but to say, you know, it's a kind of, I guess, different cultures also, I'm thinking of different ways of expressing, you know, different languages. Some people say, well, I have arrived. In another language, you would say, I arrive. And it's not exactly the same, you know, that it's like the tense is different, in sort of the sense of it is.
But there's still the moment you walk in the door.
Yeah,
That's...
some people say, I arrived, and some people say, you know, I'm here, I am, or I arrived.
Yeah.
That's labeling.
So I'm not sure I quite... yes, there are sort of cultural ways of experiencing different things in different ways, yes. But once you've defined what arriving is, then there is, either the moment you walk in the door or the moment that you, let's make it that. I think that's a good one. The moment that you walk in the door. When he arrives, does he say, "I've arrived," or does he?
Yeah, he says it in Japanese though. Tadaima. And then,
that means like this now. That's
He's already in the door.
yeah, but then I have to say,
Yes, right.
Okarinasa. Welcome. Coming.
So even this discussion that we're having here now shows that these things, that they're made up of a bunch of, if you want to call them parts, or that every concept or even every action has parts that can be labeled in different ways. All we're trying to do is see the ways in which all phenomena can be broken down. And you can see that the preconditioned way that we view things and experience things is not fixed. That's really what we're doing. How does this help us? What is the value of these observations? They have a number of important implications. First, when we come to see that everything we perceive and experience arises as a result of an infinite series of interrelated causes and conditions, our whole perspective changes. We begin to see that the universe we inhabit can be understood in terms of a living organism where each cell works in balanced cooperation with every other cell to sustain the whole. So this idea that there is a whole and that all the parts sustain it is itself viewing the universe not as an entity, but as a dependent entity dependent on all the cells that make it up. If then just one of these cells is harmed, as when disease strikes, that balance is harmed, and there's danger to the whole. This in turn suggests that our individual well-being is intimately connected both with that of all others and with the environment within which we live. It also becomes apparent that our every action, our every deed, word, and thought, no matter how slight or inconsequential it may seem, has an implication not only for ourselves, but for all others too. So, what do you think of that? I'm going to reread that because
Okay.
our every action, our every deed, word, and thought, no matter how slight or inconsequential it may seem, has an implication, not only for ourselves, but also for all others too. This puts enormous responsibility on our shoulders. And I think that this is really, this recognition of this should be the main instigator, the main cause for our engaging in life with a spiritual intention, with a spiritual point of view. It is recognizing that my actions bear some kind of responsibility. Every action, every deed, word, and thought has an implication not only for ourselves but for all others. What,
It's hard not to disagree with that. It's hard to, it's hard to disagree with that, what I meant to say. And that it's, probably that is the fact that all of our actions ultimately influence not only ourselves but others as well. As you say, it's a very good reason for self-examination and so that we understand what our motivations are and what our consciousness is, and why we do certain things, and so that we can learn to, live in a way that respects ourselves and everyone.
so hopefully it goes further to the point of motivating us to search for the ways by which we can assume this responsibility responsibly. But I'd love to hear everyone's feelings about this.
I have a question. What if you forget? I mean, what if your motivation in the morning is as such, and then as the day unfolds, slowly, you get into a situation where you just become, you're not so mindful, and then what do you do? How do you catch yourself?
Well, where you have to develop discipline is that when you do catch yourself, you try to reinstill in yourself some kind of responsibility. We all float. We may set our motivation at the beginning of the day, and then we get involved with life.
Right.
But when we suddenly can remember this, the setting of that motivation at the beginning of the day is very important. Reviewing your day at the end of the day, and seeing that you really let yourself go. And, thinking of this, think of the way in which our sloppy behavior affects the universe.
Right.
That in itself should help us maintain.
But if we can't see that directly, it's more difficult, isn't it? So in other words, if I say something really silly or stupid to somebody, and then I regret it, and then it's too late, then what do I do?
You go to the Security Council.
Call 911.
You, of all people here, have the ability to go to
To the SG?
you. Yes.
I think it's interesting what you're saying because, we were talking about consciousness before, and I think of consciousness, and I don't really think of it as something, in fact, I think of it as something that's very ephemeral, at least in my case. And a lot of the time, I don't really know what I'm doing, or, I'm not,
Neither do
I'm not,
I.
I'm just,
You mean you're not mindful? Is that what you mean?
I'm
I
not,
don't know what I'm doing, I'm not mindful.
I'm not, I'm just, and so, and there are times when you just forget that you shouldn't do this, or you shouldn't, you just are in that kind of state. And so I don't know what, but
How to
it
catch
happens,
yourself.
but then I don't know.
You lose the habit
You
power.
try.
You keep catching yourself becomes a habit, and there's less and less distraction, they say. That's
Yeah.
not my case, but
And how do you establish the habit?
by every time something happens,
But
like
you have
you
to-
remember, you recall it's very blunt at first, but after a while it becomes second nature. Like you know how to do anything. The mind, like a horse, it gets trained and it starts to do things. Yes, that's right.
I'm learning from
How many times?
So,
Yeah.
someone has written,
Make a joke.
understanding that time lacks inherent existence leads to non-judgmental open awareness in the moment is a question. So understanding that time lacks inherent existence doesn't necessarily lead to non-judgmental open awareness in the moment.
No, it's not. Okay.
No. Working to understanding that time lacks inherent existence leads to an understanding of impermanence. And that impermanence breaks down our sense of the solidity that we attribute to most things. Non-judgmental awareness in the moment non-judgmental awareness. The idea of non-judgmental. It's not that we don't judge, it's that we try to see that there are so many conditions that lead a person to behave in the way they behave, that begins to break down our ability to immediately judge in one way or another. I don't think that
awareness be clean without judgment. And when you talk about awareness, pure awareness, just knowing. The judgment is the second thing that comes in.
Yeah, this person is asking whether this seeing time as lacking inherent existence could lead to non-judgmental awareness, and I don't think it does. I think non-judgmental awareness, and I'm not sure that we're trying to work towards non-judgmental awareness. We're trying to work at judging ourselves. We're trying to judge with wisdom and determine that it's best to engage in virtue because of all the
consequences.
Yeah. I hope that's helpful to whoever it is who wrote that.
Yeah, that's right.
So we seem to have come to the end, but please, as I said in New Jersey last Wednesday, consider this, page 41, our every action, our every deed, word and thought, no matter how slight or inconsequential it may seem, has an implication not only for ourselves, but for all others too.
Class is done in the past.
Okay. So, we shall read the Sutra of the Recollection of the Noble Three Jewels.
Also, Rinpoche passed away, but we didn't want to do the recollection of the jewels.
Return, quick
Yeah,
return.
he returned quickly.
Haven't we already prayed for Nari Rinpoche? Well, today's the 49th today.
Okay. May he quickly return as well. I prostrate to the Omniscient One. Thus the Buddha, Bhagavat, Tathagata, Arhat, Samyak Sambuddha, the learned and virtuous one, the Suvata, the doer of the world,
the charity of human beings,
The unsurpassable one, the teacher of rivers and humans, is the Buddha Bhagavat.
the Tathagata is born with all merit. He does not waste fruits of virtue. He is accompanied with all patience. He is the basis of treasures of merit. He is ruled by the nine gods. He blossoms with flowers of the major months. His activity is timely and appropriate. Seeing him, he is without disharmony. He brings true joy to those who belong to faith. His knowledge cannot be overpowered. His strength cannot be challenged. He is the teacher of all sentient beings. He is the father of Bodhisattvas. He is the king of noble ones. He is the man who does journey in the city of Nirvana. He is the sense of wisdom. He possesses has not seen him. His form is uncovered. He is not there by the one side. He is not there by the one form. He is not there by the formless man. He is completely liberated from suffering. He is completely liberated from standards. He is not possessed with doctors. His ayatana control. He has completely cut the last. He is completely liberated from extreme trauma. He is liberated from gravity. He is the son of the river. He is perfect in all wisdom. He abides the wisdom of Buddha Bhagava, who abides in the past, present, and future. He is not bound by nirvana. He abides the ultimate perfection. He brought the holy refuge to all the beings. All these are the perfect virtual divinity of the Buddha Bhagava. The holy Dharma is good at the beginning, good in the middle, and good at the end. Its meaning is excellent. Its words are excellent. It is unqualified. It is completely perfect and completely pure. It completely purifies. The Bhagavad teaches the Dharma well. It brings complete vision. It is free of service. It is always timely. It guides further, seeing and fulfills one's purpose. It brings divinity inside for the life. The Dharma which is taught by the Bhagavad is revealed and not reliable. It is renunciation. It was that one arrived for pure enlightenment. It is without condition. It is pretty, it is trustworthy, and puts the end to the journey. As for the Sangha of the Haryana, they think actively, they think passively, they think straightforwardly, they think harmoniously. They are worthy of veneration with joy harm. They are worthy of receiving salvation. They are free of gross merit. They are completely capable of receiving all peace. They are object of generosity. They are great object of complete generosity.
The protector who possesses great kindness.
The nature teacher, the basis of social merit and virtues. I prostrate to Tathagata. Pure the cause freedom of passion. Virtuous liberating from wrong runs. This is free ultimate truth. Attachment to the Dharma which is peace. Having been liberated, they shall the path of liberation. They are wholly dedicated to the distance. They are wholly filled with virtue. Attachment to the Sangha. Attachment to the Buddha leader. Attachment to the Dharma protector. Attachment to the Sangha community. Attachment to the clear voice. The Buddha church is accessible. The Dharma church is accessible. The Sangha church is accessible. Having faith in Jesus accessible. Therefore, the Buddha is accessible. May they be born in complete pure Dharma.
Okay, we will read the 8 verses on training the mind. With the determination
To accomplish the highest welfare of all sentient beings.
Whose perspective of which gratitude, I will learn to object from fear. Whenever associated with others, I will learn to put myself as lowest of all, and respectfully help others to discipline, prevent them from harm. In all actions, I will learn to change my mind and refuse to steer emotional rises. Engaging myself with others, I will feel peace and prayer. I will learn to cherish human beings, and those are backed by strongest peace and suffering. As the Dharma which is the church is difficult to find. When others rejoice, with the peace and so on, I will learn to give all loss and offer to victory to them. When the member man benefit grateful, when I research respect them, I will learn to love justice and strength to God. In short, I will learn to offer to everyone without exception all health and happiness directly and indirectly, and I respectfully compare myself all harm and suffering from my mothers. I will learn to use purposes, undefined vaccines, rewards, suspense, and rise with the phenomena of my dreams, be released from harmful attachment.
prayer for spiritual children, Dr. Chungwari Busha.
Exalted wisdom of all natures gathered in a jar.
So revealed and manifest in which for long ago fed with aspiration prayer, lost stage of battle lost teaching, sprangly came to the end of earth and thou holding the commandment, remember all things to me my death, and to add greatly. Yea, you have taught the God activities of all art, is with the welfare of others. Therefore, is freely commands the voice of God. Though impossible for you to use success and to VREELAND to the fundamental cause. It is said to the children of Nirvana to swift return from the realm of Dharmakaya, brought forth the issue to the rock by the 70s, have been raised to the Father with the scholarship for the Bible music, raised up swiftly as the life of illumination, full of the sacred teachings, and which fulfill to return as Lord of the Sunday, manifested truth of the spiritual truth, Mahakala, Kamayama, and the ocean of Dharma protectors. May you tap hands to fulfill our wish. The swift blossom with the college to the fresh moonlight space.
Class in New Jersey, in South Orange, New Jersey, on Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock.